Hi and welcome to Your Stars Within. I'm Little Wave, and today we're beginning the House series. As promised, I'm going to go through each planet in every house and help you to better go through your own chart and understand it. Now, it's important that you know your own chart so that you know which planets and which houses to pay attention to. I did make a previous video called How to Find Your Big Three. I will link it here. And that one's going to show you how to pull up your chart. It's not that difficult. It maybe looks a little bit confusing at first, but I promise you it's doable, and I walk you through it step by step of how to enter in the data so that you can pull your chart. So I really encourage you to do that before watching these videos. I'm learning that some people really are overwhelmed or confused by pulling up that chart, and they want to know which information applies to them. So I am offering a service for $12 because of the 12 houses. If you want me to pull up your chart for you and just send you, really clear-cut information, which planets are in which houses, in what signs, so that you can follow along, I'm happy to do that for you. But again, I did make you a video. It is free to pull up, and I hope that you will follow along. So the motivation for this video came from the fact that a lot of people were giving me the feedback that they kind of know the signs and they kind of know the planets, but when they get to the houses, forget it. They don't get it. So I really want to go through the houses. Now, the houses are based on your time of birth. So if you don't know your time of birth, you will not know your houses. The more exact your time of birth, the more correct. So this is where that becomes very important. The star that's rising at the time of your birth becomes your rising sign or your ascendant. Those words are interchangeable, okay? And that begins your first house. So, two people born on the same day, they're going to have certain planets in the same sign. So maybe their Saturn is in Libra or their Pluto is in Scorpio. And they're all going to have that. But where that energy comes out in their life, that's based on the house. So based on their time of birth, one might have that in their second house, one might have it in their fifth house, one might have it in their 11th house. And that's going to make a big difference of where that energy outlets in their life. So that's what I'm going to talk about with you today. So we're going to start with the first house. And we're going to talk about each planet if it's in the first house. Now the first house is ruled by Aries, right? Because it's the first sign, and it's going to go on like that. First house, first sign, second house, second sign. Now your first house is probably not Aries. But just to understand whatever you know about Aries, right? I, self, quick-witted, right? Things like that. That's going to represent the first house. The first house is the house of self. Who am I? How do I present myself to the world? How do I tend to think of myself? Okay? So whatever sign that's in, your first house is in Pisces, your first house is in Libra, right? Whatever sign that's in is going to tell you a lot about who you are and how you present to the world, because that's what your rising sign is. Then we want to know, is there any other planets in the first house? And if there are, then there's some interpretations for you. Now, of course, if it's got a negative aspect or a positive aspect, or if there's multiple planets, that gets a little more complicated. But I'm not quite ready to go there yet. I just want to talk about the planets and the houses right now. Okay, so if you were born with your sun in the first house, your sun is also who you are. So you're going to have a very strong presence. You have like the who you are in the who you are house, right? You're going to show up with, people are going to notice you. They're going to notice when you walk into a room, okay? You are going to be a born fighter, probably a fighter for justice unless very negatively aspected, a natural leader. Some of the negatives might be arrogance or pride. Of course, the sign that it's in might, mitigate some of that. But who I am stands out very strong. If you're born with the moon in your first house, the moon is your emotions. It's your emotional self and your emotional patterns, your instinctual patterns, right? How you react to things, what your instincts tell you. Also kind of learn from how you were raised. So in the first house, who I am means you're gonna feel things. You're gonna feel everything, and it's gonna be hard to hide those things. You're gonna sort of feel like your emotions are on the surface, like you wear your feelings on your sleeve. You may not want to do that all the time. You may wish that you could be a little more stone-faced, but have a hard time because you really just can't help it. Those emotions just rise right out to the surface for everybody to see. You're going to tend to be sensitive and intuitive. You probably feel your way through life and have a good sense in that way. Your emotions probably do guide you, though you can get confused because you absorb a lot from your environment, and it can be confusing if that's your emotion or something in your environment. It's also going to make you moody and changeable, much like the moon. You may notice certain cycles or patterns in your life that are sort of cyclical, and you end up realizing like, yeah, okay, that's me. That's something about how I am as a pattern in life. Okay, so Mercury, we know Mercury is our thought process. It's our intellect. So you lead with your thoughts, you lead with your knowledge, right? Tend to probably be very intelligent. Mercury in the first house is going to make you quick-witted, communication, reading, writing, speech. You may like things like puns or wordplay, and also self-expression. Anything related to self-expression is probably going to really speak to a Mercury in the first house type of person. Chatty, very chatty too. Okay, Venus. Venus we know is our sign of beauty and of harmony, right? Getting along well with others. So when we have Venus in the first house, we tend to present as very beautiful. We may spend a lot of time beautifying. We may like things like makeups and lotions, or we may like to share those things with the world or with others. Oh, look what I found. Anything that's sort of beautifying, fashion, style, diplomatic, right? You may tend to be very diplomatic as well. And people are drawn to people with Venus in the first house. It feels good. They look attractive in the world. Mars. Now, Mars is our oomph, right? It's our drive, whether that's our motivation, our sex drive, our aggressive drive, right? But it's our drive. So when you put Mars in the first house, again, you lead with your drive, you lead with aggression. You probably have a bit of a temper, and it is seen. People tend to see your anger. You tend to outlet that anger out in the world. You may be rash and impulsive. At the same time, you probably have very high energy, assertive, competitive. You're probably very competitive, but often victorious, right? So a person with Mars in the first house, there's win or lose, and it better be win. When we get to Jupiter, Jupiter is exuberant. It is optimistic. It's a benefactor, right? And it tends to make bigger or enlarge things. So Jupiter in their first house probably makes your personality larger than life. Your presence is seen, jovial, optimistic, things like that. It's a good placement. Saturn, when we put Saturn in the first house, now remember Saturn is our taskmaster. He makes us work hard, so we tend to associate Saturn with delayed results. And that's because we have to work for those results in life. They don't come from past life. We're not bringing those in, but we've chosen to work for them in this life. So whatever Saturn touches is where we're going to have slow rewards. But if you do the work, the rewards will come. They will manifest and be very solid and real. But they're slow because we have to work hard for them. So with Saturn in the first house, a person tends to be very serious, very responsible, stable, and hardworking. They may have trouble letting go and having fun. That in this life, their personality is one of hard work and seriousness. With Uranus in the first house, remember that Uranus is sort of eccentric, odd and unusual. So when you put Uranus in the first house, you have a person who's sort of interesting and different, and they're going to sort of lead with that, or they won't be able to hide it if they wanted to. They just are different. Uranus is also the planet of astrology, so if it's in your first house, you may be inclined that way, and that might be why you're watching this video. Very freedom-seeking individual with Uranus in the first house. Neptune is our planet that is our planet of disillusion, right? So things are kind of murky or foggy with Neptune. It tends to help us to see the interweb of life and how everything is sort of connected, but we can lose our sense of grounding with that shared reality and that being here and now on Earth in this body. Neptune's kind of out there. So when you put Neptune in the first house, this person, others will have trouble seeing who you are. They will tend to project onto you their ideals. So they may see you as this spiritual guru, or they may see you as the perfect woman or man, or they may see you as the, whatever, but they're going to see you based on their own projection rather than who you really are. You tend to function as other people's muse. People with Neptune in the first house may tend to have identity issues because there is this kind of like, oh, maybe I am that, maybe I am that, because they kind of are in touch with that oneness or that everythingness. You could be everything, but what am I then, right? There's kind of this intangibleness to it. They're very sensitive and very intuitive, which can be a strength, but it can also be a weakness. You have to really be careful with what you absorb from your environment. It's an extremely, extremely sensitive placement, and you need to watch the energies that are around you and keep that energy away. Be very careful with substances, especially if that Neptune is negatively aspected by something. There's an easy tendency for addictive issues with Neptune in the first house. Lastly, there's Pluto. Pluto is intense. It's transformation. It's the phoenix rising from the ashes, or the butterfly after the cocoon, right? But it's the process. It's not just the butterfly. It's the caterpillar. It's in the cocoon. It's in pain, and it's mush, and it's muck, and it's hard, and then it emerges in a rebirth. And so when you have that kind of energy in the first house, you have a life of deep transformation. Of transformation of the personality and transformation of the ego. That this person is going to go through life with many different internal phases and changes as life will sort of kind of pull away from you the things that you think you are to help you go deeper into those transformations. So there is this like constant process of cocoon and rebirth that you will experience in your life. People with Pluto in the first house tend to strike others as very deep or intense. There's kind of a Scorpio feel to them in general. So that is our planets in the 12 houses, or in the first house, our planets. And next up will be the second house. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to work our way around this wheel. Again, this is Little Wave at Your Stars Within. Please pull up your chart so that you know which one of these planets in which houses apply to you. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.